Welcome, good afternoon. I'm Sharon O'Malley. I'm an assistant professor of journalism and communications here at the college, and I'm the faculty advisor for Campus Current, which is the student newspaper of Anne Arundel Community College. If you're sitting in the first 10 rows or so, you should have a copy of that on your seat. On behalf of Campus Current's editor-in-chief, Amber Nathan, I'd like to welcome our guests to Anne Arundel Community College and thank the students, faculty, and staff who took time out of your busy day to be here with us today. Before I introduce Mr. Chris Wilson, I'd like to thank a few people for helping to make today's event possible. First, Alicia Morse, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, and Karen Cook, Dean of the College of Business and Law, both made generous donations that allowed us to have copies of the speaker's book here to raffle off to students and to put together a little reception for you outside right after the presentation. Students, if you didn't get a raffle ticket, go get one because you could get a free copy of the book. I'd also like to thank Dawn Lindsay. Is she here? I was going to introduce her, but she's not here yet. The president of the college is planning on being here. Next, I'd like to introduce the very hardworking editors of Campus Current. Editor-in-Chief Amber Nathan, are you in the room? Would you stand, please? Associate Editor Christian Ritchie, will you stand, please? One word, unbelievable. So great. And the rest of the Campus Current staff, will you stand if you're in the room? Thank you for being here. Next, could my students from Com 101 Introduction to Mass Media stand? So the students have been busy promoting this event for the past month all over campus, in the community, and with the media. So thank you so much for your hard work and for your passion for this project. I appreciate that. On your seat, you will find a colorful index card. This is for you to write a question if you have one for the speaker. Once the first part of it is over, we'll ask Alexandra here to ask Mr. Wilson some questions. And the speaker will answer as many questions as we have time for. At the end of today's program, we'll announce the winners of the student raffle. We have 20 copies of the speaker's books to give to students today. So students, again, go out and get a raffle ticket. They're free. Finally, we'd like everyone to stay, if you'd like to, for a few minutes after the event to get your book signed and maybe get a selfie with the speaker and also get a piece of cake. We got a cake with a picture of the book cover on it. It's cool, it's out there. Now for our main event. So first, please welcome Alexandra Radovic. She will be interviewing the speaker for us today. This isn't the first time, oh sorry, clap for her, she's so great. This isn't the first time Alexandra has interviewed this speaker. Alexandra is a junior majoring in journalism at the University of Maryland, College Park. She graduated from Anne Arundel Community College last May after serving for a year as the editor of Campus Current. During her time at Campus Current, she did a 3-part series about Anne Arundel Community College's program to send professors into local prisons to teach classes. And she heard about Chris at that time, and she did an interview. And if you're in one of the front rows with the newspaper on it, I've stapled that article to the newspaper. As you'll hear during the presentation, one of the reasons that we invited Chris to come and speak to us today is because while he was incarcerated, he earned his associate degree from Anne Arundel Community College. So he's come back to his alma mater today. And Alexandra is the one who invited Chris to come back today. So thanks for doing that, Alexandra. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Now, Chris Wilson, would you like to come up? Chris Wilson will be telling us his story, which is equal parts tragic and victorious. At age 17, he was sentenced to life in prison, and shortly after, he decided to do whatever he could to make it a good life. He created something he calls the master plan, It's a list of goals for his life, ranging from earning his GED and associate degrees, to getting healthy and fit, to starting a business that would help the community. He'll fill you in on the details, but spoiler alert, he got out. He wrote a book about his experiences called The Master Plan, My Journey from Life in Prison to a Life of Purpose. A movie based on his life is in the works. Chris is a painter whose artwork has appeared in galleries all over the world. He's a motivational speaker who loves to talk to audiences of young people with the hope of inspiring them to find purpose in their own lives. I don't know if Chris is our most famous graduate, but I think he's going to be. Thank you, Chris, for being here with us today. Everyone, please welcome Chris Wilson and Alexander Radovic.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm so glad to see so many faces. Why don't we start off by you just telling the audience about your story, and take as much time as you need for that.
Okay. So I guess if I had to tell my story, I think back to when I was really young, I guess 25 years ago. This was when Washington, D.C. was unfortunately the murder capital of America. And so it was a lot of drugs, particularly crack cocaine, that was sweeping through our neighborhoods at the time. And I remember, like, I was a good student for the most part, like to read books. I would get in trouble for crossing the main street to go to the library. I wanted to read about dinosaurs and Greek mythology, and I wasn't really into sports. So I played the cello and I was on the chess team, but my siblings, my older brothers in particular, was like, man, that's lame, man. What you playing the cello for or whatever, right? So I never actually applied myself the way I really wanted to. And then as I got a little older, the gun violence in my neighborhood picked up. And, you know, at night we would have to sleep on the floor. And then, you know what, I started losing family members and friends. So every couple of months I would have to go bury some of my friends. My brother got shot in front of the house. He survived. My cousin got shot in front of the house. He passed away. And I just remember when I was young, you know, my grandmother would tell me, I write about this in the book, she would just say, mind your business and just go to school, and God don't like the ugly, right? I don't know what that meant, but she would say that all the time. And I couldn't pay attention in class. You know, like they would be shooting all night, and then, you know, someone would get killed, and then I'm expected to go to school and do my multiplication, and I just couldn't do it. And eventually, you know, the stuff caught up with us again, and my mom and I were attacked by a police officer. And the police officer knocked me unconscious, and when I came to, he was sexually assaulting my mom. And then he tried to kill my mom, but my mom survived. And because he was a police officer, he only did a little bit of time in prison, and he made parole, and he came out and he started stalking our family. Now, back then in the state of Maryland, there was no law against stalking, and he used to be a police officer, so they couldn't do anything to him. And so around this time, myself and my siblings, we started carrying guns, and, you know, just for protection. But like I still had to bury friends. There was still a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I was young. I was around 14 or 15 around this time. And my mom could never work again. After the attack, she was overprescribed her pain pills, like they still do today. And she couldn't get off of them. And so my mom, like, we had eviction notices on the door. We juggled between having heat or the electricity. And I just remember being an angry little kid. It's like, why can't I be a kid? Why is everything so messed up? And fast forward, you know, one night, you know, I'm in front of the house, and some men, you know, I'm walking, and some men started following me. And, you know, the men followed me, and I was like, I knew they wasn't from my neighborhood, so I said, let me go up to the gas station or to the 7-Eleven. There's a lot of people there. It's bright. Like, they won't do anything to me there. And I had a gun on me. I just didn't want to use it. And so when I went to the gas station, these men approached me, and they was like, are you Chris? And I was like, yeah. And they was like, we've been following you. We've been watching you. Don't think that you're safe. We know where your mother's at. And then one of the guys tried to get behind me. And I remember pulling my gun and firing my gun. And they ran in the opposite direction. And I went in the other direction. And I found out later that I took a person's life. And so, you know, I got charged as an adult. And while I was in jail, people came to my father's house where my brother was staying at. And they tortured my brother, and they killed my father, and made his mother watch. She was in the house. And then, I got found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Now, as you all can imagine, going to prison, it's like being teleported to another planet. As soon as I got there, like, they humiliated me by like stripping me naked, like laughing at me. And it just was like it was just like a wild place. And I remember falling into a deep depression. And it was like, I'd never done anything with my life. And why is my life over? And I met this guy who was studying in a day room. And he was studying computer code. He didn't have a computer, but he was just writing it out on paper. And I asked him, what he was working on. And he was like, I'm gonna teach myself computer programming. I'm gonna get out of prison, I'm gonna start a company. And I laughed at him. And I was like, dude, you don't even have a computer. Like, how you gonna pull this off? And he was like, it doesn't matter. And so I had a chance to think about it, right? I looked around in the rec room, and there were people getting tattoos. There were people doing push-ups. There were people like fighting and shooting dice and yelling at the TV. And I thought about my end game. I was like, this isn't who I am. And like, who is the person that I want to become? And I thought about it. I was like, I know I'm book smart. I just never applied myself. So I locked myself in my cell with a few sheets of paper, and I wrote up what I call my master plan. And on the master plan, it was, I wanted to get a high school diploma. I wanted to earn a college degree. I wanted to teach myself to speak in Spanish. I wanted my dream car, which was a black Corvette convertible. I wanted to travel around the world. I wanted to write a book that motivated people, particularly young people. But like, most importantly, I wanted to be free again. I wanted to be free. And at the time, I didn't know what social entrepreneurship meant, the definition. But I wanted to start a company that made money, but also help people or help the environment. And that was it. And so I wrote that down. I sent a copy to my judge and to my grandmother, because everyone listens to grandmothers. And I taped a copy on the wall. And every day after that, I just exercised. I went to therapy. I went to school. And eventually, I found out about this college program after I finished my vocational shop, and it was Andirano. And I was like, I'm kind of smart, right? But I don't think I can get into college. I'm not college smart, right? And so we studied, and it was 20 slots. And I was like number 20. And I remember the folks from Andirano was like, you need to brush your math up. You need some remedial math or whatever, right? So I was like, all right, I'm willing to do that. And I got in, and I struggled at first. But then I remember the professors coming in, a couple of them in particular. I remember Dr. Steele, who was a sociology professor. I remember him coming in. I remember a history teacher, the oceanography teacher, and they treated us like regular students. If not, some of the professors pushed us even more. And I remember a professor telling me, I won't name this professor, but the professor was like, this is horrible work, right? And it's like, you have nothing but time, so there's no excuse for you to be getting stuff wrong, right? So you go back, and I was just like, expecting him to be like a little intimidating. He was like, nah, no, this is school, right? So, and then like they started pushing me, so I started staying up and I started drinking coffee and just working. But then once I got deep into the work and started learning about the world, I kind of felt a little ashamed of myself. And it was like I was just learning about like the French Revolution and like people building these beautiful like structures and like these concepts in sociology. And I was like, how did I end up in here? Right? And then I started reading about the civil rights movement, and like the professors were just pushing us more, read this, and just pushing us. And then like one day I just woke up, and it was like, I had like some confidence. I was like, I felt empowered. I started getting straight A's on all my work. And even after I graduated, like none of my family came, but all of the professors from Andirano came. And me walking across the stage was like the proudest moment of my life. And after I graduated, I stayed in college. Every time there was, we got this class, we got this. And sometimes it was like, there's no credit, and I'll still take it, right? Just because I liked it. And then I ended up spending 16 and a half years in prison. And I stayed in touch with my professors the entire time of my incarceration. They would send books. They would come in sometimes to check on us. And I got out. I was homeless. I was unemployed. I had $50 in my pocket. But I had my plan. And so since I had a degree from Andirano, my plan was to go back to school as a transfer student. So I enrolled in the University of Baltimore. And then while I was out, my mom found out I was home. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe you out. How'd you get out? Did you break out? I thought you had life. I don't understand how it works, right? And I told her, I said, Mom, I got this plan. I'm in school. I'm gonna start a business one day. She was like, you sound different. I was like, Mom, I'm 32. And my mom started acting real strange, and she was like, "Here's some things I need you to remember. Remember to finish your plan. You know, remember like that I love you." And I was like, "All right." She was like, "Remember that I love you." And I was like, "All right, Ma." And when my mother hung the phone up, she wrote a letter and she committed suicide. So she never even got a chance to see me, like, you know, graduate or see me as a free man. And so, like, you know, that was a few years ago. And so I've been home 7 years now, and I've started several companies. I've helped 275 people in Baltimore City get jobs. Less than 10 of those was minimum wage jobs. I went from feeling invisible and spending over 100 days in solitary confinement to coming home and winning every award in the state of Maryland, including a presidential award from Obama. I've been offered a full ride at Harvard Business School. My friend Steven, who mentored me, who we went to college together and stayed up all night and studied, and we call it the math wars or the quadratic equations and everything else. It took him 20 years, but Steven's home. He started his software company. He brought his dream car. I brought my dream car. You know, life's been great. The book's out. It's being turned into a film. But like the most important thing that I've learned like through all of this and like my story is like just like paying it forward. And I want people to think like when they read my book or hear my story that I'm the exception or I'm remarkable. Like I'm all right, but I've made it this far because a handful of people saw potential in me and they continue to push me to the day. Like I'm a coachable person. Like if I mess up, you can scream at me, and when you're done, I'm gonna say, all right, you know, how could I have done it better? And that's my philosophy. So, and it's just like that's my story.
Thank you. Well, I think we can all agree that you're more than all right. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think one thing that is interesting is that at the time when you first went to prison, you were at a similar age from a lot of the students that are in the audience. How would you compare your day-to-day life in that stage of your life compared to a lot of the students here who are preparing to go to college or already in college?
So I think earlier when I spoke, I described it as going to another planet. So it's exactly that. I mean, it's hard to describe, like just like radio, like 20 radios playing at one time, people screaming, heat, no such thing as air conditioning, like having a fear for your life. But that being said, we did have a school, and the school was different from the outside environment. School was like a sanctuary, so the teachers just, you know, they were teachers. So when you came in, it was like, leave all that mess outside the school, and they were there to teach. And so that was a place, the school and the library is where I found like sanctuary at.
Awesome. And things for you were different in your circumstance because even though you were under the impression that you were going to be in prison for life, you still decided to take control of your life.
Right. So I call it a positive delusion. And so so I had to delude myself to believe that I would get out one day. And so it was, I think I got the term, not the term, but like the idea from, I was reading a book when John McCain was a prisoner of war in Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam. And he was there for a long time, so like 8 years or something like that. But it was a dude next door to him who would always tell him, like, hey, he'd knock on the wall and he says, hey, man, we be home by Christmas, man. Y'all making a big fuss about it, right? And they knew they wasn't going home by Christmas, but after a while, and John McCain wrote about this, he was like, I could sleep better if I just chose to believe him. And so when I went off to prison, I just had to believe that I wouldn't be in here for the rest of my life. And if I believed it, then I can get up every morning, I can study. And then folks, you know, it would be temptations in prison. People would knock on my door like, Chris, get up. And I'd be like, what's up? They'd be like, I smuggled in some alcohol. Like, come on, it's your birthday. And I'd be like, I can't do it. And they'd be like, why not? And I was like, because I'm going home. And my friends would be like, dude, you never going home. But like, I genuinely believed it. And it just like allowed me to resist temptation, allowed me to study every day. And I'm home.
We're very glad that you're home. And when you sat down and wrote that plan out, was there one specific goal on it that you valued more than the rest? Is there one that's really close to you that maybe you've already achieved or that you still hope to achieve?
Is this outside of coming home, being free with a life sentence?
Yep.
Or outside of that? Okay.
Of course. You already achieved the number one.
Right. So I wanted to travel the world. And I recently got my passport, I think 2 years ago. In the past 18 months, I've visited 21 countries.
What's your favorite?
I would say Spain. And while I was working on this book, actually, it's an interesting story, and we were doing the edits, and I flew to Spain, Barcelona for the summer, and I forgot some of the things that was on the master plan, right? And so I was reading and going through it. And that day I had went to the La Sagrada Familia and the Picasso Museum, and I was on the beach. And while I was doing my edits, I was scrolling down the list, and it was in that exact order, like to do those 3 things, and I just burst into tears. And my friends were there, and they was looking over, and it's like, you all right? And I was like, something's in my eye, or whatever, right? But traveling is so beautiful. I do it as much as possible, and I came back to the States just like with it just changed me. It makes you more appreciative of the stuff that we have, but also, you know, you see a different way of living around the world, so that's changed me a lot, and so I definitely appreciate it.
So what would you say as far as once you did get released,
right,
how your life after that was different than your life in prison? What was the biggest change that you had to deal with?
So I got out of prison, I was 32, and just acclimating back into society, right? I mean, I knew how to, like, the gist of like cell phones. I thought people were crazy at first. I didn't know about the hands-free and the earpiece, so I saw everybody just walking around talking to themselves, and I was like, a lot's changed. Everybody's crazy, right? But the thing that was toughest for me, it was more psychological. Like, yeah, I was homeless. I was sleeping on people's sofas and stuff, and I got like some food stamps, and I would sleep in my friend's house and clean their houses up and stuff. I got a lawnmower. I was cutting grass. I was filling out applications to get in school, so I was okay with all that. All that stuff was better than being in prison. But the thing that was most difficult for me was being 32 and seeing people my age, seeing my friends and family members with like families, and like being out at a bar and introducing myself to a woman and her laughing at me like, what is this $10 phone from Radio Shack? And like, where do you work at? And where's your car? And you know, it hurt because I didn't have anything. And so I was patient though, but that was something that was most difficult, and that's something that's difficult for a lot of people coming home. They get out and they want to catch up. They see the world, like they missed a lot. And I always tell people, like, don't rush, be thankful, be patient.
So what were some of the first things you did when you were released?
So I remember when I was in prison, and I used to go to the library every day, and I would put these requests to the librarian to research stuff online. So my first day home, I just spent all night just on Google and like YouTube. And I was like, I could type in anything and learn stuff, and so I stayed up all night just doing that. And then some good food too. Had a steak, I think, I believe.
Good choice. I would have done the same. Maybe not the research.
Yeah.
That's very ambitious of you. So what do you think the best part of your freedom is for you?
This may sound strange to you guys, but being able to go back in prison. Like, I was in the West Coast for the past couple of days, and just going back in, because I remember when I was young, my teachers, some of my teachers, my uncles, they used to always say, like, you guys are up to no good, you guys gonna end up like dead or in prison, or, you know, you could easily just go out and get a job or start your own business. And no one ever came and sat down and showed me how to do it, right? No one ever say, oh yeah, go get a job. And it's like, resumes is pretty difficult, like, to get it right, or like start a company or anything, right? And especially anyone who looked like me, who came from where I come from, they never came back into the neighborhood. And so to be able to to go back in and be a positive example. Like, I was out in the jail, in the prison in San Francisco, and was sitting down with, like, you know, 100 guys, and some who had read my book, and just telling them, like, you know, you may be upset because you in here, you committed a crime, you should be punished, but you got time, right? Just study, like, make a plan, and you can get out and you can stay out. And so, like, that's the best feeling. Judges and prosecutors send me letters. or call me sometimes and tell me about the other Chris Wilsons who, since hearing about my story, have got high school diplomas and college degrees and started mentoring behind the fence and had their sentence reduced in our home in these communities as mentors and stuff. And so, like, that's the best feeling, you know? It's the best feeling.
Absolutely. And what was your life like while you were a student in prison? I know you got your AA,
Yeah.
and you also got your GED while you were there.
Yeah.
So what is student life like? I imagine it's much different than the way that we go to class every day.
Well, I mean, so starting off, right, this will surprise some folks in the audience. So in the school, high school, and college, it was co-ed. So it was women in there. So like the guys, some of the guys were pretty distracted, like in class, right? Some of the women were too, but like I was focused. So I had my crew that we studied together, and you know, we would study, and we had like things like if I got something wrong, I had to drink a cup of water, do 25 push-ups. So I put on like 30 pounds of muscle while I was in there, but I stayed focused. It was a lot of stuff going on. Like some people like took their lives in prison, some people lost their lives, and all this stuff would go on around us. And I would just be like, it's midterms. I need to get to school. Like I'm just focused, right? And I just stayed focused. And I will say that the professors were super patient. They would come up to teachers sometimes, and like jail's on lockdown, or they'd make them wait out front for like an hour, and they would still come in, and they would still push us. And so the way I looked at it was like, you know, all the stuff that's happening around me, all I need to do is focus on my education. And it's different from, and I tell this to students often, it's not just regurgitating the information back to the professor. I knew what I wanted to do when I got out of prison, and so every professor that came in, I'm asking like relevant questions. Even if it was about stuff like, I was taking like a meteorology course or whatever, like I still was trying to learn and how can I apply this to like what I want to do when I got out. And so, and that discipline like transferred over to like running companies and just getting stuff done on the outside.
So why do you think you put such high value on your education?
I wasn't good at anything else. I mean, what else? Well, what else? Like in the environment that I was in, right? I knew I had to go to therapy. It took me like 2 years to open up and talk. And I knew in the inside that I was intelligent. Like I knew I could read books. I knew I had a good memory. I knew I had a good heart. And it just was the logical approach was just to show myself and show everyone else that I was intelligent. And we were lucky to have this pilot college program come to the prison, and it just changed me. And then like when I came home and I became an advocate for this, you see all over all these studies that show even a little bit of college, even a little bit of education drastically reduces recidivism. Somebody can break into your car and they should go into prison, but you don't want them sitting around in prison and learning how to be a better car thief. They come home and break into your house or whatever. They should go back into prison. They should go into prison, and it's punishment, but they should, learn something. Maybe they come home and start their own car mechanic business, right? That's what we want, because either way, taxpaying citizens pay for it.
Right. And a lot of your book is reflecting back on your childhood and sort of the struggles that you faced. And I can see now that your life now is much different than your life then.
Right.
And I'm wondering, you especially used the analogy of being in a cave as sort of describing your struggles. So how would you advise somebody, you could explain sort of what you mean by that and how you would advise somebody to overcome that sort of feeling?
Right. So in my book, I write about, and I speak about this often in some of my talks, Plato's allegory, the cave. And it's about a prisoner, it's about a bunch of prisoners that are they're stuck in this cave, chained up, and people bring them food. There's a fire behind them, they cast shadows on the wall, and they make a game out of trying to identify stuff in these shadows. But the one prisoner feels like there's got to be more to life than this. And he makes it out the cave, and he discovers this beautiful, vibrant, colorful world, right? And it's so beautiful to him. And he's like, we thought that was real down there? Like, this is the real world, right? And it's the equivalent of how when I was away in prison, and I, growing up, I thought it was just about my neighborhood and just about my block and like my family, and it's like this big, huge world, all this, beautiful things in the world. And that's what college did. Like, it opened my eyes up to this, right? And so, but in the cave, this prisoner is somehow returned to the cave. And then his friends, they mock him and tease him. Oh, you thought you was different. You thought you was better than us, and try to make it out. And the cave, what I write about, is just a way of thinking. You know, you might have some people that's just like, they angry and it's all about this. And it's like, look, dude, relax. Like, you know, it's a big world out there. Like, go to the beach, like, relax. You got some, I do gang mediation. You got some guys like, man, this is my block. I can't let anybody come on this block. There's this, and I'm out here every day. I'm out here all night. And it's like, one, this isn't your block. You don't own it. And like, two, like, this is kind of stupid, homie. Like, it's not going to work out well for you. And so it's just a way of thinking. And you have people like that. Like, it could be someone who's just like a workaholic, and they're just like working and work. And the whole time, like, their family is just like upset because they don't get to see them and stuff. And it's like, it's a mindset. And so, like, I encourage people to just think about the bigger scheme of things in the world.
Right. And was there any difficulties that you faced, that you maybe still face, after you'd gotten out? You know, of course, there's the idea that it's great and everything's perfect, but I'm sure there's still hardships that you face related to that experience. Do you ever get any backlash?
So I remember when I was home a few months, and I got into school, and I started competing in business pitch competitions. And I was almost undefeated for about 2 years. And I started my first company and started growing in employees and stuff, and had contracts. I was making like $30,000 a month. And, you know, I learned a little bit of things. So I went to the bank and I was like, I need a line of credit. So, you know, my accounts receivables come in. I need to be able to pay my people and like get supplies. And no one would loan me money. Right, even though like I had these contracts, I was doing business with the city, and they wouldn't loan me money, and it was because of my criminal conviction. And so like that was something that was very painful. I mean, it still existed. I had to get creative on how to get around it. I had to get someone to give me a guarantee that, like, you know, with a bank in order to get a line of credit. But that's, you know, that was a challenge for me. But there's all kinds of challenges that I had to face. You know, folks. I mean, and most of this is probably out of ignorance, but just calling us convicts makes it so difficult for a person to reacclimate back into society. Like, imagine a child, and I was a child when I went to prison, right? You steal a piece of candy, and, you know, you pay for that, right? Many, many years, and it's like you're 40 years old, and it's just like, here's Charles, he's a thief. And they just call him like thief, like, you know, for the rest of his life, like it's wrong. And, you know, that's one of the things that, you know, we're returning citizens, like we're people just like everyone else. If a person makes his or her mind up to, like, you know, I want to do the right thing, we should welcome that. There should be like a path to redemption. We should get them jobs.
So you overcome all of that by staying so focused and creating these businesses, developing an art career, writing this book that's going to become a movie. Do you think you've always had that sort of overachieving attitude, or did that stem just from being in prison and having nothing else to do?
So I have this debate with some of my friends often, and the debate is versus, and we think about like successful people, I guess in that sense, was it adversity or was it like nurturing, right? And so that's what we talk about a lot, right? And I faced a lot of adversity, but there were moments in my life when I was nurtured, right? And I mean, it's hard for me to say whether or not I had drive. I know my track coach, who I write about, you know, I had asthma, or I thought I had asthma, and he taught me like mental toughness. My sister too. My sister went through everything I went through, but like she made it. She became like successful. She didn't have to go to prison. And these people, like, they stayed on me and they pushed me. And so I wouldn't say that I had it in me, but I knew what the right thing to do was. And then, you know, the thing about going into prison and like being humiliated and like having all this stuff happen, you know, therapy kind of like helped me out. Therapy helped me out by accepting responsibility for what I did. Even though these people came after me, I had to accept responsibility that I took a person's life, right? And then I had to, like, you know, be more introspective with myself. It also taught me how to communicate better, like with people. And so all those things, in addition to like folks telling me that I wouldn't make it, or that, you know, my life was in prison, and that if I ever made it out, I would be lucky if I got a job at a gas station, right? That's what like some folks would tell me. And I tell people this when I go back into prisons, when I go into schools. It's like there's always going to be someone who doesn't want you to succeed or be successful or want to see you fail. And you can get angry, you can cuss them out, and you can let it get to you or whatever. But I always tell people, you pay them back by being successful. And so just like I study harder when people like, yo, you can't do it. And it's like, all right, I'm going to read faster. I'm going to take more notes. I'm going to stay after class and talk to the professors. I'm going to ask more questions. When I'm in class, like folks just get upset. Like, any questions? And they be like, oh, come on. I'm like, I want to learn this stuff because I want to apply it. And so I guess it was just developed over time.
Right. And do you think if you would have never been incarcerated, you would have studied the same things? How do you think your path would have been different?
So this is a difficult question to answer, right? My experience, my past made me who I am today. And if I had to look back at where I was at 17 and what was going on around me, eviction notice on the house, my friends dying, I just don't think I would have made it. But I don't want people thinking that you got to go to prison, like to turn your life around. But I just don't think I would have made it.
And what would you advise students or just young people in general that are heading down that road? How would you want to help them?
That's heading down the road that I was heading down?
Yes.
I'm a big believer in just tough love and just telling it how it is, right? There's plenty of bad spaces. Like folks who are on the same track as me that was like acting up or just like making a decision like to carry a gun. Maybe I would have been dead if I didn't have a gun, I don't know. But I made a decision, so I put myself in this box, right? And so America don't have any problem locking people up, right? And so I would say that. But the flip side is this, right? I think back when I was young and some of the problems that I had, when I think back on it now, it wasn't as big as I made them out to be. And I wish when I was that age, I would have reached out to someone. I was the type of person I bottled stuff up, or I felt like the older folks, the adults, they won't understand what I'm going through or whatever. And years later when I was in therapy, my therapist would ask me, well, did you ask anyone? Did they understand? Did you reach out? And it's like, no, because they didn't say, how did you know what they would have done? It's like, I didn't. And so I would tell young people, even if it's someone just to listen, just reach out. And even as adults or older folks, we shouldn't be quick to judge. If someone's gonna have something in their mind, let them speak before we judge. And young people like to bottle stuff up like I did. And so I would encourage people just to share or reach out for help. Even in the neighborhoods that I grew up in when there was so much gun violence, I write about a part in the book where when my cousin got killed, and the prosecutor showed me a map of my neighborhood, and it was over a period of 6 years. And so it was 89 murders or shootings over a period of 6 years, right? And then she looked at me and she was like you ain't gonna make it. Do you even care? And I just think it's important for young people, just reach out to somebody if you're going through stuff. And then adults, let's be there let's be there for our young people.
And the teachers and faculty, I know there's many teachers and faculty from AACC that are in the audience. How would you advise them to handle students in this current day and age?
So I talk about this sometimes in my talks, and I think about when I was growing up, especially a day before, a Sunday, and I had to be in school Monday, and I had to watch my mom get beat around by her boyfriend all day, or not having food, and just my clothes being dirty, and having to go to school and like wear this mask and like people like laughing at me. It's like, you had that on Friday. Or just the teacher's like, Chris, are you listening to me? And I'm staring out the window because I'm thinking about like, you know, how it was when, you know, my mom was getting beat or her screams. And, you know, my teacher would sometimes like put me out of class. You don't want to work, you could just get out. And so like what I would say to teachers is that, you know, it don't have to be students that come from the neighborhoods that I grew up in. Like a lot of students go through stuff like this, and they may not be so quick to like pull their teachers up and say something's going on. So I would say to teachers, like, try to be sensitive to like what students go through at home, and instead of just like, well, we'll just get out of class. I mean, I'm sure like the schools has like counseling and stuff like that. Like, I mean, we didn't have it, but I think schools have that today. It's like, send them to the counselor. If you sense something's going on, like, you know, just try to get them some help. that's what I would recommend.
And to kind of switch gears, you seem to have taken a lot of your hardships and translated them through your art.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how this whole journey with your art started. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I was just painting too before I came here too. So everybody got paint on me. But so my contracting company, some years ago, 7 years ago, we started doing work for like museums and galleries. And I, by the way, like I knew I could draw a little bit growing up, and there was some parts where I was mixing paint when I was incarcerated, but I had no interest in art. I remember taking art class through Anne Arundel, and they gave us this big, fat, 1,000-page book. I was intimidated. But like after a while, after doing work for all these artists and stuff, when I would get off work, I would go to my friend, Jeffrey Kent, who's an artist based in Baltimore. I would go to his studio and sit in the corner. I work like a 10-hour shift, and I'll sit there, I'll be tired, and they'd have like his house music on, and there's like canvases everywhere, and he's just dancing and painting, and it was like these vibrant colors, and I would ask him, I was like, hey Jeffrey, like, what's this about? And he's like, man, this is about racism. You know, I spent some time, you know, over in Europe, and, you know, he's telling me these stories, and he was like, this means this, and this means that. And then I was like, wow, that's cool, and I would do this for like a year or two, right? And so one day on my birthday, he came to visit me, we had dinner, and he said, I want to give you a birthday gift, I'm going to give you 5 art lessons. And I was like, man, I don't want any art lessons, you can give me some money or something, right? I want the lessons, right? And I started taking these lessons, I took 2. But I remember going to a studio, and I was like, all right, what we do, give me the paint. And he was like, no, hold up, chill out. And he told me, he says, Chris, art is all around us at all times. He was like, you just got to see it. And he says, like, think about stuff that you care about. What is it? And I was like, I care about criminal justice reform. And he was like, all right, cool. And he was like, it should look good, right? You know, if people want to put it on their walls, you know, it should look good, right? And I was like, all right. He says, but you also should be able to defend your art. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he says, like when you make a piece, say if it's about something in a social justice issue, you should research it. It's just like a college paper, right? You research it as much as you can find, right? You research the symbolism behind it, like, you know, who are the experts in that field? And he says, you want to be able to defend your work. So I want to ask you, like, what's this painting about? What were you thinking about? You want to be able to explain that. So I was like, okay. And he says, get up right now, go up in the alley and find some trash and make art. And I was like, trash? What are you talking about? And he was like, get up. So I was like, all right, man, this is a waste of time. So I get up and I go out in the alley and I'm looking through trash and I find this palette. I take this palette, I wish I had a picture of it. And I take the palette home and I thought about something that I care about, which is solitary confinement. I spent 117 days in solitary confinement. There are some people in America who spent years and years and years in solitary confinement, 20-something years. And what I discovered was that 80,000 men, women, and children in the state level are subjected to solitary confinement, which the international community, everyone else, like, it's torture, right? And so I remember just being upset when I was researching this for this piece, and, you know, I wanted to make a piece that told that story, right? And so I painted it, and I brought it back to him, and I remember him looking at it with, like, this grimace on his face, studying it, and I was, like, just waiting for him, like, to scream at me or something, right? And he was like, you painted this? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, don't ever stop painting. And so that was 2.5 years ago. That piece sold a few weeks ago for $20,000.
And you've also gotten an opportunity through this book to, I'm sure, talk about your art more, because the more people know about you, the more they find out about, you know, the different hobbies and things that you have aside from this book. But I know that you've been able to talk to Barack Obama, and you've been able to be on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. Yeah. How are those experiences meaningful to you? Does that stuff make you nervous?
Nah. So it's funny, right? I know on my list I had like stuff like people that I wanted to meet, and I would talk to my cell buddy and stuff, but like I don't get starstruck really. Yeah, so, but it is exciting, right? Like I was with Sean Connery's family a couple of days ago, and I was just imitating Sean Connery and James Bond, right? But that was a bad impression. But I definitely pinched myself, right? I remember like just being in the White House with like, you know, like a glass of wine and like looking at my friends like, dude, we in the White House, right? Or just being in Baltimore, like riding around with like Alicia Keys and like taking selfies, I mean, it's cool, but they people just like us, you know? But I'm definitely blessed to make it this far, like to meet folks. But like who I'm more impressed with, you know, versus like celebrities and stuff like that, although like they cool. I met Dave Chappelle. I went to his house one day and he like made me laugh, almost used the bathroom myself. But it's another story. But what I'm more impressed with is ordinary people that do extraordinary things. So that's what moves me.
Do you think, I'm sure a lot of those people feel misunderstood, a lot of celebrities and people that are in the public eye. Do you ever feel like you're misunderstood in any way?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. But not often. Like, you know, I was nervous writing this book. I talk about like my upbringing. Like a lot of people, almost everyone who knew me never knew anything about like my early life, and it was painful stuff, right, that I had to go through, and being kidnapped and being tortured, and just, you know, all kinds of stuff that happened to me, right? But, you know, I see it like as a sign of strength. You know, it's a sign of strength, like to tell my story, and as long as it can help someone, I'm gonna just keep doing it, you know.
And where did you start with this book? What clicked in your mind that you wanted to start telling your story?
So when I was 19, and when I was locked up, I wrote that I wanted to tell my story, but I hadn't really accomplished anything really yet. But that was like, I wrote up what I wanted to do, shared it with my judge, my grandmother, and so it was like, all right, I gotta do it. And I told people in the prison, I was like, if you see me like slipping, you see me not on it, like, you know, let me know, stay on me. And so I just had to just work hard towards doing it. What's the question again, too? The last part?
Where you started?
Where it started, okay, yeah. So I started at 19, but I journaled every day, and I still journal.
Is that sort of how the book developed? Did it start as journaling?
Yeah, so it started, I came home, I had a big thing of journals, and then at a certain point, when I was home a couple of years, it was like every month I was winning an award, and it's like White House, and it was like White House wants to see you again. It's like White House wants to see you again, and it's this, and you're going here, and then after a while, you know, all these articles, I was like, I might be like ready, like to tell my story, because then I had like, it was like a happy ending. Like I was worried about, you know, getting out of prison and just, you know, not being able to do anything and just like accomplish stuff. But like once you got like a couple hundred people like in your city that you help, or I can't go anywhere in Baltimore without somebody like stopping a car like, hey, and like I'm in restaurants and they're like, your tab is on the house and all that stuff. And so I felt like this was a time to tell my story, especially knowing all the stuff I went through in my earlier life.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you hope people take away from your book? Like what sort of audiences do you hope to reach?
So we live in a crazy time in America, right? All kinds of stuff is going on. Like I shake my head when I cut the news on now. I live in Baltimore, I love my city. We still have a lot of challenges to overcome in the city. A lot of people who look like me are being killed, right? But I hope that like the world or people who read my book will really like pay attention to like what I went through growing up, because it's what a lot of young people go through. And, you know, I got every excuse to be like messed up, but I'm not. And when we see stuff that happens on the news, we're quick to say, call a person a monster or like this. We never think about all the things that happened to this person before like that happened, or how we dropped the ball when like someone was being bullied, or like all the stuff happened in school and there was no counseling for that person. Because one of the things I realized is that hurt people hurt people. So we got to be more preemptive versus reacting. Like something happens and everyone comes together as they should, and it's like, how did this happen? We got to put a stop to it. Let's start coming together before stuff happens.
Thank you. And I know telling your story was just part of your plan. Is your master plan something that changes, or do you stick with what you originally wrote?
So in the book, I have the original master plan and it evolves throughout the book because that's what happened in real life.
Right.
And so some stuff on the original plan, I tried to like take it off the master plan because I was like embarrassed. It's like I wanted some gloves and some Prada shades to wear in my car, and it's like I wouldn't like put that on there now. But they was like, no, leave it on there because that's what you wanted at the time, right? And then there's like some things that you add on it. I didn't plan to become a painter or artist, right? And so I recommend, so it changes over time. So I recommend, the plan is like, you're guiding like your compass, right? You know where you're going. And then every now and then you may need to pivot or like add some stuff to it or maybe take some stuff off. Like I had on my original plan, pay my brother back, right? So my brother used to bully me. I was small. I went to prison. I was 118 pounds. And so at a certain point, when I was in college, I was 175 pounds, all muscle. And I was like, I'm gonna beat my brother up when I get out. That's what it meant, right? But as I got older, right, like maybe the third version of the master plan, I scratched it out and I left that in the book. It was like, pay my brother back, and it's like a line through it. And it's because I had matured. And I was like, why in the world would I work this hard to go home, beat my brother up, he called the police on me, and I'm back in prison? That's stupid, right? And so I left it on there, and it was like, that's when I came up with like, instead of like responding like that, you pay people back by being successful. So I said, I'm gonna work really hard. I'm gonna get everything that I'm striving to get, and he's gonna see me in my tailored suit or whatever, and I'm gonna be nice to him. And that's what I did. He was flinching too. He was waiting for like the punches. And I was like, I wish you the best, brother.
Well, I know you say that you have believed, you talk about in your book and in a couple of interviews that you've done, that you have always felt that you were a good person in your heart. And I know that your family, especially your mother, ingrained that in you. Who is inspiring you today? Like who keeps that attitude in you?
So I wrote about her too, Jane Brown, who's in the book. She, the president of Robert Deutsch Foundation. And her in particular because, it's something special about people who help and do stuff like quietly, and they don't do it for like recognition or their name on the building or anything. They just do it because it's right. And so she didn't have a reason really like to help me. I had coffee with her, and she had knew about me. I was in the community working on my days off, volunteering, chasing little kids down the street, racing them and speaking to grandmothers, doing everything I can do like to lift the community, right? And she knew about it. And she also knew that I was in business pitch competitions, that I wanted to do something, and she was just like, I'm gonna help you do it. And I remember just like breaking down, and she was like, get you a laptop and like just start it, go in. And I was like, I'm gonna pay you back, I swear. She was like, nope, just pay it forward. And so like now, when I meet people or I see people like just do something and like no one's like watching and they just like go do it because it's right, like that's what motivates me. And so it's people like that, like her. So she's become like a mom to me. And so I try to emulate that. Like I see stuff that needs to be solved or whatever, and I might not even say anything to anyone. It's like, all right, if it's writing a check, if it's like volunteering my time, I'm gonna just do it because it's the right thing.
Thank you. So how did the idea to make this book into a movie happen? 'Cause that's pretty exciting.
So I actually got the movie deal before the book deal. Like they had reached out to me and was like, we heard about you, this is an incredible story. And I was like, hold up, back up. I was like, I want to do, let's try to get a book deal, and then we do the film. So I've been working with the folks now to get this film into fruition. So it's a lot of work, but I'm super excited. I'm gonna get someone to play me, but I will be in it, like an extra, like doing something silly. Like, that's Chris right there. So
Who's gonna play you think?
I don't know yet, but I know we're talking to some folks. I don't want to go on a record because it's like it doesn't count unless the ink is dry. I learned that in business school. Like,
That's true.
We have a couple of questions. I think that's off now. We have a couple of questions from the audience.
Great,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you. Okay, so someone in the audience wants to know how you stayed so positive after all of your negative experiences.
So, and I'm assuming this is like just like now, like being messed up. So, like freedom is so beautiful to me. I'm, you know, like the hamburgers and like just Netflix and stuff like that, right? My bed, like, so like I used to dream about just like the small things, right? And I still have nightmares. I still go to therapy. I still battle like depression just because of like all the people that I lost. So that's just like, I just got to learn how to cope with that. But like life's too short to be angry and upset, whatever. Like I could apply that same energy into something positive. And so I take that same anger that I have and I go down Capitol Hill and I talk to staffers. I talk to like senators and congressmen and that's what I do. I go down to Annapolis. So I take that same energy and just try to advocate for people who don't have a voice. And so I don't have time to be bitter and be angry and throwing stuff across the room. Like, that's played out.
You've experienced so much trauma in your life. How have you managed to heal from so much pain? Do you have a daily regimen that sustains you?
Absolutely. I paint till I can't paint anymore. I stay up all night, whatever I paint, but I also go to therapy too. So my therapist is a big fan of my art, but I go, and I encourage anyone, like, you know, mental health challenges, like, don't make you broken or whatever. We got a lot of people who are struggling with stuff and like don't want to like talk to anybody about it. Like, it helps me get by, like it helps me cope. I change my diet, I exercise, I go to therapy, I paint, I'm good.
Please speak more on positive delusions.
So, positive delusion, I think it's cool because, you know, oftentimes you're around folks. I hope you guys are not around folks who doubt you. I've accomplished a lot. Like, I jokingly call myself like the Black Forrest Gump because I'm like just doing so much stuff. But like with me, if I make my mind up, like I write it down, and then I surround myself with people who don't laugh at me, right? They figure out like, well, you know, let's see how we can make it happen. And so like the positive delusion, like it can't be like too delusional, right? There's gradations to it, right? You can't just be like, I'm gonna learn how to fly because I saw like on the Matrix and Neo was flying. It's like, nah, that's too much, right? But just be positive and be delusional in a positive way, right? Where it's like, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can learn this language in 12 months. And it's like, man, but you know, like Russian is, I'm doing it. And just like believe it, and if you believe it, you'll work hard as if it's gonna happen. And so I recommend people just trying it, but just as long as it's within reason. Don't get too delusional.
What are your favorite music artists?
So to be honest with you guys, the past like year, I got really turned on to like deep house music. So that's what I paint to. So let me think about this. I'm gonna say like Sheba San. I've been listening to that like every day. I was listening to it in the car on the way here, just getting hyped up to see y'all. But yeah, it's probably my favorite artist, yeah, I think.
Awesome. And there's one more for you. There's a lot of discussion these days about prison reform. What one or two reforms do you think would make the most impact on integrating ex-prisoners back into society successfully?
Good question. I like the term. Yeah, all right, so I would say we're working right now to make the federal Pell Grant permanent. And the federal Pell Grant is like, also money trickles down on the state level to fund education programs behind the fence. Like I said earlier, all the data supports that even a little bit of education reduces recidivism. I feel like it's a good investment. As taxpayer citizens, we're paying for it anyway, right? So like that's one thing. The last one, the second thing, right? You said two things, right? The second thing I would say is for juveniles, right? Like we're charging juveniles as adults and we're throwing them away. So like that needs to stop, right? You know, needs to stop. You know, America is so quick to talk about like other countries and like what we do or whatever, but like the way we treat our children says a lot about us, and so we should do something different.
Absolutely. And is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to share with everyone?
Follow me on Instagram, Chris Wilson, Baltimore.
Thank you so much.